Pure evil. The nation mourning after 17 people are shot and killed inside a Florida high school, and this morning many asking what drives someone to commit such a heinous act.
And here to help us figure that out, maybe answer that question, is forensic psychologist Dr. Nancy Zarse. Thank you so much for joining us again today. You know, we were talking during the break, and we get to this all the time. Every time we have these stories, so what drives somebody to do something like this?
For a reason. And that sounds simple, but I want us to start right there, because there are two types of violence. There's affective violence and there's predatory violence. Affective violence is emotional, it's immediate, and it's in reaction to a threat. The goal is, in fact, the purpose is to eliminate the threat. Predatory violence is planned and purposeful, and it's for a goal. There's not much emotion typically, and there's not a direct threat. This is predatory violence.
Affective violence, you said, is like something like you're in the middle of a bar and you get into a fight and you react.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe there's an internal or an external threat. It could be a threat to manhood. It could be someone coming at you with a clenched fist.
Correct.
So think self-defense, think barroom brawl. That's not what any of these instances of school violence, mass casualty violence, terrorism are. They're predatory violence.
The alleged shooter is 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz. I know you can't comment on him, on his state of mind. That said, doctor, we're learning more about him. A lot of this is anecdotal. It's coming from classmates. One classmate I heard talked about how he bragged about shooting rats with a BB gun. When we're talking about somebody who purposefully hurts animals, is that an indicator, a warning sign?
Yes. So those are the kinds of things that indicate a pro-violence stance in general. Like you think about a hunter, they're killing an animal to put food on their table. That's very different. So when we put a number of concerning elements together, that's when red flags need to be flying. So if someone is advocating violence, if somebody is justifying violence, if somebody is starting to identify targets of violence, and what that comes back to is the pathway to intended violence, which starts with a grievance, sense of injustice, real or perceived, that must be avenged. And then it goes to ideation, which is the decision that violence is the only means by which to avenge. And we don't necessarily see that, but by stage 3, it's research and planning where they start to gather the information to implement their plan. And by 4, it's to gather the items. Step 5 is breach, where they're actually in, let's say, the hallway with the gun. And step 6 is the actual attack. We don't necessarily know stage 1 and 2 unless the individual talks about it,
right,
or this day and age, they post on social media.
Right.
But by stages 3 and 4, we have visible behavioral indicators of a problem.
I have a question for you, but I know Scott was asking in the break, and I think it's a very important one to ask about what the police officer said.
Well, we heard that soundbite, Doctor. He used the word evil, and I think that's thrown out sometimes, and it fits nicely into a box, but it doesn't really talk about what was in this young man's mind. Reportedly, someone who lost both parents, his mother died from the flu last year, a victim of bullying. There is a story, a backstory to this shooter.
Yes, and as you've said, I can't talk about the shooter, but what we know is that loss is a precipitant for violence. So one of the things we want to track are the warning signs and then the potential triggers. Because again, that feeds into the grievance and movement. The most important thing you want to ask yourself is there movement from thought to action? Has the person started to develop a plan and start to move towards that violence? And all of those things are warning signs.
You know, we talk about this man and this gunman and what happened and the shock that comes with it. There are so many families right now that are reeling from this, the ones who are still praying that their loved ones make it through. What would you say to people who hear, oh, there's evil? Then here in Chicago, we've got a cop that was shot. People hear these stories and they just want to turn off the news. They don't want to listen to anything. They don't want to go out of their house. What would you say to people to encourage them to, there are good things happening in this world?
Well, not only there are good things happening in this world, but this violence is not senseless. We hear that people say, oh, it's senseless. It's not. It serves a purpose for the perpetrator. And when we say senseless, not only do words matter, but when we say senseless, it projects a sense of hopelessness.
Right.
There's nothing we can do. There's a tremendous amount that we can do to prevent and intervene in these instances.
Especially, when somebody like this kid is maybe expelled from school, there should be some follow-up possibly to make sure he gets the proper counseling that he needs to help him give him strategies to cope with his anger anger or whatever's boiling inside him.
And we see this. We see schools expel. We see companies fire. And we think, well, we've pushed the problem away. But we still need to manage that risk.
Right.
And there are tremendous things we can do. We can get these people involved in pro-social activities.
Right.
We can give them hope that violence is not the only answer.
Right.
That's going to be the last word. Dr. Nancy Zarse, always a pleasure. Thank
I
you
don't
so
want
much
her to
for
go.
coming
I want to
in.
continue
know.
talking to her. You're so
Thank you.
interesting. Thank you.